All good?
All good.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, you're fine.
Join me at CMC.
Get engaged and get educated.
Join me at CMC.
Everyone is welcome.
Join me at CMC.
Come grow your relationships.
Join us at CMC.
CMC is real,
authentic conversation.
Engage with curious people.
Plus, we give you access to thought leaders.
Be informed, be inspired.
Through community conversation.
Come here and meet your neighbors.
Be here in the room.
ask questions,
Get answers.
Connecting people and ideas.
Learn about Columbus.
Who will you see at CMC?
Join me at CMC.
You're invited.
Watch us on live stream or in person. You're invited.
Join the conversation.
You're invited.
Welcome to CMC!
All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. Hope you had a wonderful Valentine's Day. And welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Good to see all of you on this, again, very warm, unseasonably warm February day. Founded in 1976 by 13 visionary women leaders, Columbus Metropolitan Club's mission is to connect people and ideas through community conversation. And to carry out its mission, CMC explores public policy issues, current events, and lessons in leadership at forums like this one each and every Wednesday. From its beginning, CMC has welcomed everyone, so we welcome you here today. I'm Matt Barnes, morning co-anchor at NBC4 today and a member of the CMC Board of Trustees. Pleased that you all are with us today, and we always like to begin by meeting our newest CMC members, because we absolutely love meeting our new members. Let me just read off the list here. We'll give them a round of applause when I'm done. We have Robert Eggleton, Paul Irwin, and Susan West from State Bank and Trust, April Murray from RMN Electi, Jeff Powell with U.S. Bank, and Trenton Weaver with the City of Gahanna, and our newest lifetime member, Aaron Cordell. Let's give them all a big round of applause. And I know what you're thinking, how do I get to be part of the Cool Kids Club of CMC, right? I can tell you right now. Membership is open to everyone, and at less than $17 a month, it's also affordable. So you can visit the CMC website to become a member today. Forum tickets are half price to members, and you'll be helping support these important and fun, interesting community conversations just like today's. So take a look at your forum flyer. It's all right there. And you also see the organizations that support the not-for-profit Columbus Metropolitan Club. Half of our revenue comes from these supporters, and it's their generosity that helps sustain CMC. So to join that list of sponsors, please see Jane, as you saw right here, Jane Scott, or Lady Cuthbert right there in the back who's closing the doors. You can see either one of them after the forum. We also want to take a moment to thank today's sponsors, the Kroger Company and AECom. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. And of course, we want to continue to thank the Grange Assurance Audubon Center for their ongoing support, helping us during this time. And as well, a thank you to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for providing today's live stream. And now to today's forum, which I'll be honest, I don't know anything about, which actually excites me. Because, sometimes we all like to think we know everything. I know nothing about this topic, and I'm going to get in an hour, and I love that. The Final Frontier is coming to Columbus. The Ohio State University will soon be home to a ground-based copy of a space laboratory being planned for a new commercial space station. Now, this lab will be a replica of the George Washington Carver Science Park, which is a component of the next generation space station called Starlab. Ooh. I really, every time I say that, I want to do that. The Starlab truly will be a cosmic win for Ohio, as we will learn about today. So to introduce our panel, I want to bring up Amy McCormick from today's sponsor, Kroger, to introduce our panel.
Good afternoon. I, like Mr. Barnes, was very intrigued. And I know when Jane reached out, I was like, is there a food time? And there is, but I'm not going to stress on that. I did some research, like many of you may have, prior to making a decision to join the forum today. And I heard the terms cutting edge, exciting, advanced, and innovative. And those terms are not what many people would associate with grocery shopping at Kroger. Would you agree? Right. But did you know in 1883, Barney Kroger started the Kroger Company in 17 feet with $372 and a horse named Ann? And did you know that Barney was the first to bake his own bread so he could sell it at a lower cost? He was the first to put a butcher shop inside a grocery store. And Kroger was the first to scientifically test the product in their store. Now, while that may not sound like a big deal today, but in 1883, it was cutting edge, it was exciting, it was advanced, and it was truly innovative. So I am not going to share anymore. I hope that little riveting feedback or tidbits about the Kroger Company and the tie to what I know is going to blow our minds that we're going to hear very, very soon. So without further ado, please welcome our speakers for today. Dr. John Horak, the Neil Armstrong Chair of Aerospace Policy at The Ohio State University. Dr. Jeffrey Mamber, President of International and Space Stations with Voyager Space Holdings and founder of Nanoracks. Dr. Scott Schreier, Professor and Chair of the Department of Food, Agriculture, and Biological Engineering at The Ohio State University. And our host today, Dr. Frederick Bertley, President and CEO of our very own COSI. Dr. B, we are very excited, so we'll let you take it away.
Really, thank you for sharing those tidbits about the org. They definitely jive with what historical facts. Very interesting. Before I begin, John, Scott, Jeffrey, can I call you John, Scott? Okay. Well,
my mom would be pleased because that's what she wanted me to be called when I was born.
Great. Well, you guys can call me Dr. Bertley. All right. So, just kidding. Please call me Frederick. All right. So, before we jump into this, their bios are on this sheet. Please read their bios. But then beyond this, go online. I mean, these three gentlemen are unbelievably resource talented, just prolific in every aspect of their career. One of them, on top of crushing an amazing professional career, just happened to climb the second largest mountain in the world, Kilimanjaro in Africa. I won't tell you who did the research. Another one happens to, on top of their illustrious career, have an incredible graphic novel coming out. And the third one just pretty much runs agriculture for the country. So amazing folks here. And I apologize in advance for lowering the IQ of this panel by being up here with you, but super excited to get started. So, all right, 2020, what happened? It was an incredible year for space exploration, right? We had NASA successfully launching the Artemis program. They looped the moon and came back and landed on Earth. Collaborated with SpaceX, they collaborated with Blue Origin in massive ways, unprecedented. We had more foot traffic on the International Space Station than ever, and without burying the lead, this small thing, the James Webb Segmented or Space Telescope, brought back pictures like we've never seen in the history of humanity. An unbelievable year. And yet in that year, there was a fifth star, and these folks secured what we now know as the grant for having Starlab here in this city, in this state, for this country. So just an incredibly prolific year. So, as mentioned, Mr. Barnes, the welcome to Starlab is a cosmic win for Ohio. Could not be a better CMC title. whoever picked that title, well done. So with that, we're going to jump right into some questions, and then, of course, in true CMC fashion, we'll take questions from you all, the audience. I want to start with you, Dr. Horak. You have 3+ decades doing incredible stuff, generally in the space field and specifically at NASA. Level set us for the audience. We heard a little bit about what Starlab is. What exactly is Starlab? How competitive was the bid? What does it mean for Columbus, Central Ohio, and, as she pointed out, the Ohio State University?
Maybe I'll take that in reverse order. And, maybe when it comes time to get up and say our thanks and goodbyes, maybe carry this with you. Because yes, it's true that we're part of a team that's building the first ever commercial free-flying space station in low Earth orbit. That's true. Yes, that station is a part of the George Washington Carver Science Park, the first ever science park that will have assets on the ground and in space, interacting across research and development and other commercial activities to create social and economic, educational, and quality of life outcomes. But think of it this way for Ohio. In 1950, Birmingham was bigger than Atlanta. What happened? I think a couple things happened. Atlanta secured Delta Airlines, one of our platinum sponsors today. Number two, they backed that up with sustained long-term infrastructure investments around that, including investments in Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, transportation, banking, infrastructure. And third, they had a very different diversity, inclusion, quality, and opportunity portfolio than Birmingham did. And look what happened. Atlanta was skating to where the puck is going to be, as I wear my Columbus Blue Jackets wristband, right? They knew. I mean, I think commercial spaceflight today is what air transportation was in 1950. And so by having this opportunity here, we'll see what we make of it. But there are probably a lot of people in Birmingham who were saying, nothing's going to come of that. And if you really think that about Starlab, Ohio, Columbus, and this opportunity, all I'll just say is watch this space. Listen to the next 35 minutes of discussion.
Incredible. Thank you for that context. So, Dr. Member, your illustrious career includes literally pioneering international space collaborations with NASA and the Soviet Union, as well as you breathe life into the concept of commercial space with work on Wall Street. So, with your vast experience, why is international collaboration in space so important? And can you contextualize the current Starlab with the international community?
Yeah, thanks. Not a doctor, by the way. I haven't gotten there yet. I'll work on it, but I'll get there. Well, first off, there's two ways. First off, thank you for inviting me here today. It's always nice to be out of the East Coast and be in the Midwest. I went to Northwestern, and you can just feel the difference. So
everyone else was glad you said the Ohio State University. He gave you a little shout out from Northwestern.
When we were having our first meetings with the university, every time we said the name of the university, we didn't have the we were corrected. So it's really, we really got it down. So there's two ways to answer your question. I mean, the recent horror of the war in Ukraine has shown that the belief in international, the belief that seems to obvious belief that sharing trade and sharing supply chains, we just learned that phrase, it's now very common, sharing events, sharing customs brings nations together. Germany felt that, the United States believed that. My whole career was predicated. I did the first contract between NASA and the Soviet Union, carried over the first contract. When I say that at universities, young people raise their hand all the time and say, why did you carry it over, the contract? I say, because there were no computers, there was no email. When we were delivering the contract, I went over on a plane to Moscow and gave them the contract, all 400 pages. That's the way it was done. And so my whole career has been on the belief that, first off, international is good. Well, it turns out that may be wrong. I mean, it's a strange time. I mean, and it's not just myself. I mean, nations have been proven to be wrong. So it's important to remember in Ohio, in our daily lives, that Trade is important. Having relations with other countries, communities is important. It's how we grow. And I think that that will continue to be the case. So I believe it's important. I believe international is important. But it's also important for space because it's highly complex. It's highly expensive, even with Elon Musk, even with all of that. Elon Musk gets a lot of money from our tax dollars, okay? So even there, it's a very expensive undertaking. It's also important for symbolism. We look out and we return to the moon, that we don't do it alone, that we do it as humanity. So I think all those things are important. And then, if I may just go back for a moment, I was part of the process on the committee for deciding Ohio. And so, if I may, let's just say a little bit more as to why we selected Ohio. We had some very good proposals. So I'm with Voyager Space. We won the award for Starlab, the space station. We have competitors. We have Blue Origin is a competitor, and we're happy for that because we figure they're busy doing 18 other things, and we're focused on the space station. That's it. And we have a couple of other competitors, but we think we're entering, if I may just take a moment, we're entering a new era where as the International Space Station comes to an end by 2030, we're going to have a chapter now of private space stations. And I'm old enough to remember when we had one way to get to and from space, the space shuttle. Now, no one knows how many launch vehicle companies there are. It's going to kind of be that way with destinations, with space stations. So over the next decade, there will be 3, 4 American-led private space stations. India will have a space station. Russia will have one. China has one. So we'll have maybe 10 space stations in the coming decade. It was important at Voyager that we don't always focus on hardware. We focus on how do you get scientists, how do you get researchers to prepare to do the projects we want in ag tech and other areas in space. It'll come as a shock to you that there is not a center in the United States dedicated to space in space research. So we elected at Voyager that we would have one. And we spoke to all the obvious candidates, Houston, Huntsville, Washington, D.C., Triangle, North Carolina. And the reason we were very happy to be now taking the first steps with you in Ohio is the institutions that you have here. You know, the Ohio State, Patel, these are timely, and so many others, Glenn Center, so many institutions you have here that are not affected by the price of oil. You know, Texas is very interested in us, but okay, will they be interested in us when oil's $20 a barrel? And so we're really happy and we're really proud to be part of the extraordinary infrastructure you've built up here. And we're looking 10 years, 20 years out there, even though we're a company, we're looking 20, 30 years out. And we want to grow this area so that it's a magnet, so that there's a dozen. Zinn here in Ohio, but we don't have that many other space-oriented companies. And we wanted so that in a decade, there's 20, 30 companies in Ohio doing research. So that's why we chose Ohio. That's the macro, and there we are.
Thank you for that. And to contextualize the infrastructure on the background of the history, we have the Wright brothers, Ohio. We have John Glenn, first person to circumvent the planet, at least first American to do so successfully. And this Black History Month, so he did on the hand calculations by an African American woman. Slow shout out to Kathy Johnson. But it's also the state that had Neil Armstrong. Right? And so you think of the rich history with space exploration. Now to land Starlab is just really kind of completes the circle, no pun intended. So with that, Dr. Shearer, when most people think of space exploration, they think of high-powered aerospace engineering, physics, mathematics. And some really cool technology and gadgets that we talked about. Agriculture and biology, though, and bioengineering play a significant role as well. So, as a national leader in agriculture and bioengineering, talk to us about the Starlab and specifically it being incubated at OSU's College of Food and Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, and why Starlab is so important for your industry in support of Kroger and the other.
Thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate that question. A couple things that come to mind first off. When I started hanging out with these two over here, they spoke in acronyms, okay? And I don't know whether it's a holdover from NASA or whatever, I was trying to catch up and figure out what the first acronym was by the time the third and fourth one came out of their mouths, okay? So probably for the first couple months, I spent most of my time on the internet Googling the acronyms so I could kind of get caught up with them, okay? But I think to bring this home in some respects and the importance of research, all of us in the room today enjoyed a meal that was primarily, I'll say, plant-animal-based protein, okay? All of us were fortunate enough that we're sitting in this room. We didn't have to worry about where that meal was coming from, our ability to have access to it, and things like that. And I want to remind everybody, not everybody, even within the city of Columbus nor around the world, enjoys that same access to a healthy, wholesome diet. One of the other things that's important about this diet is it is the Haber-Bosch process, and I know that may not mean a lot to many of you. Yeah. Thank you. I know that may not mean a lot to most of you, but a lot of the protein that's on the table today came about as a result of that process. It fixed nitrogen from the atmosphere and made it available to plants. Some of our plants will do that with symbiotic relationships, but many of them don't, okay? When I think of space, it's the ultimate place where we think about sustainability. Whatever happens in space, if we can bring that back to Earth, it ensures that we're going to continue that food supply. It's going to be plentiful. It's going to be nutritious. It's going to ensure human health. And so I look at all those things we can learn in space, okay, and bring back to Earth. It becomes so important in terms of the sustainability of the human race, if you will, but also ensuring that we have that clean, healthy environment.
Oh, great. Thank you for that. So it's amazing how all these things are connected. So the next question, one or two or all of three you can answer. It was touched on in the beginning of your remarks that Starlab we're going to have here is a replica on the ground. So just to clarify for the audience, will they be an exact replica out in space? Is that going to be one of the ones that's going to replace the International Space Station as that sunsets in 2030? And talk about in here, will we just redo that stuff up there, or is it going to be a continuum?
So space flight and activities that you do in space, you spend at least 10, maybe many more times that amount of effort on the ground before you ever. It's a bad place to get up. Oh man, I forgot my dress. You just can't like go back down to the ground, right? And because the environment, as Scott was saying, is so different, you practice and practice and practice and try to understand how to beat out all the failures that you might encounter and how to make your procedures streamlined. So the things that we will see at the George Washington Carver Science Park, which will be eventually located on the north side of the Ohio State University Airport along 161, will be a working copy of the space station. Now, we don't have the ability to turn gravity on and off, right? And we're not going to produce artificially the same radiation environment for people that you're going to have up there. But to the best extent you can make it, it is the physical twin of what's on orbit so that you can train astronauts, simulate missions, fit check your hardware, diagnose failures, test your procedures, do the groundwork that complements the space-based research so that when you get a different answer in space than you get on the ground, you know it's because you went there, right? Very important in science to have a control as well as the experiment. STEM education and public outreach is enormous. We're probably going to have to build a very big parking lot for big yellow school buses. At least that's what we managed for that outcome. And then around that, over time, I believe you will see these companies that Jeffrey spoke about, perhaps federal anchors as well, researchers from USD or NASA anchored there as well as a part of the entire ecosystem of doing research in space to benefit people on the ground. And that research is going to be something I think that's well aligned with Ohio, because if you think about what do you do once you get there, that's where Ohio is really, really strong. Building sensors, making observations. I need power when I get there. Okay, go to NASA Glenn. I'm going to work on a material science problem. Okay, great. We've got a lot of that. This is a place where we can not only work to commercialize space, but we can industrialize low Earth orbit and bring that into our economy, in the same way that we have brought other physical domains, whether it be, when Lewis and Clark went up the Missouri River, they didn't really think about how many Boeing 747s were going to be built in Washington State. But as we brought that geography into our economy, not perfectly, of course, but enriched the quality of life for many, many, many people.
Oh, well, honorary doctor member, would you like to add to that?
One point, one thing that's important to John, myself, to Voyager, I think to Scott, is this is going to be, the Carver Science Park is going to be uh, a genuine science park in that it's not limited only to Starlab. And I just want to make that point. In our vision of what we're developing and taking the first steps now, we might work on platforms of interplanetary satellites, and the scientists need and the researchers need a place to go and work on the ground. We might work with competitors of other space stations that are in orbit. So I just want to make the point that what we envision is that this is a portal to doing in-space research, and you can test it and work with others and build a critical mass of a workforce, critical mass of an ecosystem that's not dependent on any one program. Starlab is near and dear to me. I've been working on it for years, but as we look forward, we want this to be more than one commercial platform in space.
Thanks for adding that. Dr. Scher, I hate to say it, we're out of, well, I like to say this part, we're out of the pandemic, hopefully. I hate to bring up the term pandemic, but as someone who studies bioengineering, when we talk about going to space, talk to us about the risk of diseases and that piece that we often don't hear about kind of in the lead circle when we're talking about space stations and whatnot.
So, as we look here on Earth, our terrestrial home, I guess, in the terminology this group to the right of me would use. One of the things we think about is, in terms of disease, humans, we have the medical community looking to control that. In terms of plants, obviously, we have a whole industry focused on controlling that. But in space, things are a little bit different. And you have to be thinking about the microbiome that the astronauts are going to live and work in. You have to think about the microbiome plants are going to grow in. We begin thinking even about the gut biology of the astronauts and a lot of things like that. There's a lot of things that we don't know yet about human existence in space. It's a low gravitational or zero gravitational field, and that creates a lot of challenges for sustaining human life. When I think to the future and I think about what this effort means, and I'm going to go back and draw on the fact that we kind of casually glossed over this, but George Washington Carver Science Park, shouldn't that say something to the room about what the focus of this effort is? A very storied individual, and when we think about plant genetics and plant breeding, and what brought us some of the capabilities that we have today, what I keep thinking to myself is, how are we going to extend and go beyond that? One of the things we know is, in terms of the biological sense, when we put things in space, they're going to be stressed differently. The plants, the microbes, whatever, are going to have a different response because of the radiation, if you will, that exists outside of the Earth's atmosphere. And so we're going to learn a lot from that process, and the hope is, and I think we have a lot of examples of this, we'll bring it back to Earth and improve the human condition on Earth, new products, new services, and things like that. I want to remind everybody, one of the things we're talking about in Central Ohio right now is controlled environment agriculture. You go to the Waterman Farm on the OSU campus, and there's a brand new controlled environment agriculture facility. I'm reminded of this because we're in one of the rooms, and there's a person talking about the ability to control everything that goes on in that room, the gas levels, the lighting levels, the content of light, and things like that. And the only thing we can't control is gravity. And I thought, man, fantastic. We got it covered now, okay? But anyways, that whole area of controlled environment agriculture grew out of the NASA space program and the ability to sustain human life in space, if you will. And one of the few ways that we're going to be able to do it easily long term, and thinking about a base on the moon, a base on Mars, is through the production of plants. Cellular agriculture could be one of those things too. So it's pretty varied in terms of the opportunities. And again, I think that what kind of crystallizes things in my mind is that George Washington Carver Science Park term that's been coined. So phenomenal.
So thank you for that. Let's follow up on that because it's been mentioned a few times now. So what exactly is the George Washington Carver Science Park? What is it going to be here? Why did you name it after him? And I'm a fan. This is, again, Black History Month. it's frustrating because he's a brilliant scientist, one of the most brilliant scientists of this country, period. But everyone knows him as a peanut guy. Like, that's all he did. And so the fact that now we named this after him, but talk a little bit more about that relevance in this diversity and inclusive space we're in.
Appreciate the question. It's a surprisingly personal answer. I named the park because when I was 13, my father wrote a book on George Washington Carver, and it's called The Wizard of Tuskegee. And I remember dimly him sitting at the typewriter and working and cursing and other things. And we can get into the whole social thing now, why a white man wrote a book on a black guy. I mean, that's the whole question we can get into now, but he did. And when we were looking to name the park, I wanted something real. This was 4 years ago, maybe. We've been working on this for a while. 4 or 5 years ago, before the whole social unrest, and I was like, wait a second, there's nothing on Carver. And we have a company in Abu Dhabi that we created, Starlab Oasis, the first company devoted to space farming. And so I wanted it to feed in from the ag tech and the Emirates up into the space station through the science park. And so I said, okay, let's do that. And then I took the book. I hadn't looked in a long time, and I didn't want to read it. I gave it to some friends and said, could you read this? And they were like, wow, this is good. So then I read it. And what's amazing is the opening pages. My father was writing in the 60s, and the opening page, you've read it, he talks about how Carver's work has allowed the creation of polymers, which is the basis of this new field called space and Saturn. And so there I am going, maybe this is why I got into the field. Okay? I mean, it was a weird, so that's why we name it Carver. And so it's to reflect that we see tech as a very important part, and also to honor a scientist who's been ignored, and he's been put into a section of there you go, and so I wanted to elevate it. What was the other part? That means a lot to me.
No, well, first of all, thank you for sharing that very personal story. That's such a compelling story. The second piece is, what exactly is that kind of connected to the Starlab? What's the exact connection? And we will have a replica here, I believe, at Ohio State.
Again, what we're trying to do here, so much, no offense to anybody wearing NASA socks or anything like that, but so much of NASA is devoted to hardware. Okay, and we wanted to do something that is not hardware. It's how so at Nanoracks, company I led for 12 years, it was payloads, customers in 30 countries. And it wasn't about the hardware. It's about the research, the imagination, the creativity. And so that's what we're trying. So in the macros we're trying to do, and then I'll turn it over to John to talk about the specifics.
The hardware is a means to an end. I mean, we need a space station. It needs to work. It needs to be able to fly in low Earth orbit for decades, right? Just like the International Space Station. That's necessary, but it's far from sufficient. You have to do something with that, and it has to be implemented in such a way that can, as we're managing for the outcome, of fundamentally changing the lives of people for the better, as George Washington Carver's research did. I'm sure he wrote a lot of papers. I don't know what his H index was. I don't know what the most prestigious journal he ever published in. It doesn't matter, because his work was about making sure that the new knowledge that he discovered, the new inventions that he created, came down and impacted the social and economic and educational and quality of life of every single person on the planet. And that's what I think is so exciting about what we're doing. Yeah, it's sexy as all get out to have a space station in low Earth orbit. And we're partnered with some very, very good folks at Airbus in Germany to help build a lot of the hardware. And Hilton Hotels, back to that, right? Hilton Hotels, Jeffrey calls me, he says, this is last June 1st. He goes, I need you to go to a super secret squirrel meeting in McLean, Virginia. I said, where? He goes, Hilton headquarters. I said, the hotel place? He said, yes. Talk about controlled environment. How many have ever stayed at a hotel? Okay, so back to Carver. If I can do something about the hotel, it's going to improve everybody's life in this room, right? They spent, not just Hilton, a huge amount of money during COVID trying to figure out how to keep the place clean. What's the minimum supply chain we need to we don't want people going in and out of your room if we don't have to. That's an opportunity for risk. So Scott's point about using space as a controlled environment, it's a controlled environment where people live and work and sleep and brush their teeth, their food. Yes, maybe someday there will be Hilton, Starlab, copy 4 going around. That'd be great. But the point is, how do we design accommodations for people on the ground from what we have learned in the super constrained environment of space that will benefit all of us? And I think we all appreciate when we go to a hotel and we don't come home with Legionnaire's disease. It's a good thing, right? Right. That's good. I see Tim in the back nodding yes. Right. Good. So these are the kinds of outcomes we want to generate through the science park. And if that is through going to Starlab or prior to that, going to the International Space Station, putting a payload, there's a company in Pittsburgh called Astrobotic. The next spacecraft to land on the moon was built in Pittsburgh. Now, I don't want to get into the Brown Steelers thing, but you talk about investments that are being made in commercial space in the upper Midwest. Look at Pittsburgh. Look at Cleveland. Look at the national security space activities at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And look at the commercial space infrastructure that's being put here in Columbus. We will have all 3 legs of the stool: civil space through NASA in Cleveland and the Armstrong Test Facility in Sandusky, DoD through Wright-Patterson Air Force Research Lab, National Air and Space Intelligence Center, and here in Columbus, the George Washington Carver Science Park. And I can get in my car from here, and I can be at any one of those in less than 2 hours, depending on how fast I drive, obeying all speed limits and ordinances.
Very cool. I mean, this is just amazing stuff. So I'm going to take one more question with the panel, and then we'll open it up in CMC style, and I'll walk you through some kind of marching orders for that. So you talked about packing the parking lot with yellow school buses. Resonates with myself and many of my colleagues here from COSI and other folks who work in the science, technology, engineering, arts, and math community. It was not an add-on. You approached many partners, 4-H, Dream Up, us, other folks from OSU, being COSI and other folks from OSU, to be part of this from the beginning. Walk us through why it's so important to think about K through 12 education, undergrad education, and the layperson and their access to this great stuff.
So I can do a couple ways to think about that, but the ground at the OSU airport is for decades. We're obviously not doing this for ourselves. Unfortunately, in 4 decades, I won't probably be able to sit up here. So who are we doing this for? Yeah, okay, good. I mean, you Canadians live a lot longer than we do, but I'm still trying to get you to come play hockey.
You don't drive as fast on the speed.
That's what it is, okay. We're doing this for them. This is really not about, although it will benefit folks in the room, current professors at Ohio State, for example, and current folks that work in the space industry. This is really for the people who will come after. I mean, if you ask Carver, for whom was he working? Right? Every man, woman, and child alive, plus all the ones that were going to come later. So it's absolutely integral. It's essential that we build this, not just for us. It's nice to be a part of it. It's a blessing to be a part of it. But it's not about Jeffrey or Scott or me. It's about all the folks that are going to come piling out the yellow school bus. And how do we create something that's sustaining, sustains their curiosity, sustains their desire to learn, helps them be competitive in a really complex and sometimes dangerous world, and helps preserve, protect, and defend all the things that we love here in the United States and the things that we're blessed with, like Scott said, the ability to have a simple meal together and enjoy part of an afternoon on a beautiful day.
Right. We certainly appreciate that commitment, but I love the idea of forward thinking and the next generations with an S. Yes, jump in.
From the business of it, despite all the headlines about, Twitter and Amazon and everyone, laying off folks, we need more workers in commercial space. We are it's one of the toughest things for us is finding good engineers, and so we need their workforce, and space is becoming more important, and so we need the students coming up through Scott's program and John's program, and it's very, very important, even for selfish reasons.
Oh, great. Well, listen, this is CMC. It's a long-standing tradition to take questions from you all, the audience. Our incredible president, Jane Scott, is there fielding questions being live streamed. But if you have a question, please, in the room, please stand up and join her at the mic and you can voice your question. Out of respect for others, we want you to keep your questions brief so that we can have as many people answer them, as many people ask and answer. And, well, you can answer them how you want, answer Hopefully, we all are fantastic panelists. And again, just you can either direct your question to an individual or all of them, but please be succinct. Thank you so much. Jane, any questions online as we wait for folks coming up to the mic?
Yes, I have one that was submitted ahead of time, and you've touched on this a little bit, but Scott Bromson, I think is his name, from NASA. This is a great win for your organizations and for the state of Ohio. Could you talk about could you talk more about where you may see opportunities to work with and capitalize on NASA's only Midwestern center, the NASA Glenn Research Center, with facilities in Cleveland and Sandusky? So I guess he just wants you to expand on some of the work that will be collaborative.
Yeah, so thanks, Scott. Scott Bremson is a close colleague. We worked together at NASA when I was there, and now he runs the legislative affairs activities for aeronautics as well as the NASA Glenn Research Center. Great friend of Ohio and a great friend of the work that we're all doing here. I mentioned earlier that one of the things that we're really good at is what do you do once you get there? Now, we're not in Columbus going to go build boosters. We're not about the 8-minute ride to orbit. There are other people that do that, and in fact, more launch vehicles being built now than ever. But when you look at what NASA Glenn is very good at and their lead center assignments, things like communications. How do I get data back and forth? If I don't get data down from my space station, I don't learn anything. Material science. How do I join materials together? Power. How do I get power to something? Think about how we're going to go to the surface of the moon, right? How are we going to store, generate, and distribute power? You're going to get out and run extension cords around? No, Glenn does all of this, right? These are the things that NASA Glenn is exceptional at. Maybe I get to space and I get to my orbit. I need to move to another orbit. In-space propulsion is what that's called. NASA Glenn has a lead center assignment for that. All of those are essential things that drive the future economy of space in the same way that roads, infrastructure, communication, and power drive our economy here on the ground. So these are very, very well aligned. And every opportunity we have, and Jeffrey can talk a little bit about NASA's plans as an anchor tenant, if you will, or a customer on board Starlab and in the science park, they're very well aligned with the strengths of NASA Glenn.
I see we have another question. So actually, I think you said it beautifully. So I think we move to them.
Hello, to the Hughes. I'd like to know a little bit more about the Starlab station. What sort of equipment is it going to be equipped with? What capabilities will it have?
I have some intel that tells me this young man is a middle schooler who will be an astrophysicist, either working at the Starlab or somewhere else. So thank you for that question. Who wants to brave it?
I'll start off, okay, because I'm the odd person out up here on this panel in some respects. But one of the things we're going through right now are the kind of capabilities that are going to exist on Starlab, okay? And so we're beginning to envision and think about is what kind of experiments people, and again, I want to reemphasize, it's a commercial space station, which that implies there are going to be businesses. NASA could be one of those entities that is a customer, if you will. But we have to be thinking about what they want, okay? The controlled environment is going to be one of those things that's going to be super critical. And again, growing plants in space is going to be important. On the outside of the facility is probably going to be what we call a crop mutation facility. What's that? Well, it's a fancy way of saying we can hang something on the outside and expose it to different radiation in space that we wouldn't normally see within the Earth's atmosphere. There's going to be a whole host of these things in terms of capabilities. But again, the central thing is going to be trying to meet all of the needs possible in terms of what's on orbit, okay? How about that? Butcher that.
Well, that's good. Basically, you'll have a space station that is about 8 meters in diameter. So it's 25 feet in diameter. If you want to go look at when we had a Skylab, not a Starlab, back in the 70s, you can remember the astronauts running in a circle. That's a smaller. They can't remember.
Only you
remember because you saw it on YouTube. It's like those old photographs of family vacations. I remember that picture. Just haven't seen that picture before. So it'll hold 4 people, 24/7, 365. It'll be orbiting about 400, 450 kilometers up above the surface of the Earth, going around every hour and a half. And the amount of volume that you'll have is about, you know what a 747 airplane is? Chop that in thirds and take a third of that fuselage. That's about how much room to roam you will have inside. But as Dr. Shearer said, there'll also be experiments that are on the outside, looking down at the Earth or collecting gamma rays from quasars or whatever. So inside and outside research with the ability to move things in and out. But ultimately, the kind of experiments that we will do are the ones that you will build. So let us know what you want to do, and we'll go make it happen.
With that, before you sit down, just your first name, please, and what school are you from? Because apparently you are going to be working for Starlab.
I'm Teddy Hughes, and I go to Columbus Academy.
Thank you. Jane?
We at the Metropolitan Club don't have young members. Come on, I love it. Yay. At the risk of dropping names, George Pantalos is a dear, dear friend of mine, and I've been watching George do research on hearts in space for a very, very long time. And I'm interested in the human component. How are you going to keep people health? How do they keep people healthy and breathing when your heart is pumping in this either zero gravity or odd gravity situation and that has to flow through? I'm always curious, how do humans function?
First off, I'll say that there's no area where NASA is more protective than on human research. So, and it's not really for the best in some ways because we in the public don't really understand as much as we should. And in the scientific community, the biological medical community, it is amazing how little we still know. So the astronauts stay healthy as best they can through exercise. The exercise, just like on Earth, is key. The bone decays very quickly. The radiation is harmful. It's not a pleasant place in that sense. Some of the things that are good in the ag tech area, not so good for us as organisms. So we really have to figure out. We don't know how long you can stay healthy in a zero-G environment. We assume in the decades to come there'll be space stations slowly turning, like for those of you who remember 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's a spinning, the whole thing of Arthur C. Clarke and Werner von Braun before him. So we think we'll have artificial gravity at some point. So the general answer is it's still wide open. It's a very much unknown how human beings, for example, will live on a journey to Mars. It's simply not known. And that's one of the things that NASA is going to be using the era of commercial space stations to study when they're a customer. Is now they're doing 6-month missions. They're beginning to do a few of a year. The Russians did 2 years, right, with Krikalev, I think. And so we're going to have to, to get to Mars is 2 years. How can we do it and not just be totally fit, perfect human beings? We want people who are not as fit. And, we want the general society to go. So it's a open question.
Yeah, the behavioral aspects of that. How do we go to Mars? You're in a can for 9 months, right? How do you take care of your behavioral health, your mental well-being, the interaction with teammates, right? That's going to be as hard as any physical challenge.
There have been efforts to get NASA together with the Navy, because the Navy has to work on the nuclear submarines, and it's been very difficult to get those two agencies to share data.
Well, so with that, there's a little shameless plug for COSI. COSI has partnered with WOSU to produce a show called Can We Do Dr. B, but we have one specifically on astronaut training that literally addresses your question, Jane, and some of the psychological stuff and this whole other spectrum of things these human beings called astronauts go through to actually become that. So check it out at COSI.org or WOSU.org. With that, Dr. Comerford, you're up.
Plug from Frederick. I'm shocked by that. No, I thank you for being here. Thank you for your work. This is very exciting stuff. Thank you for bringing it to Central Ohio. I can see it's going to lift the whole region up, and we're excited to be a part of it. I'm wondering if you can comment on the pros and cons of the privatization of space exploration. Because I can see pros, competition brings innovation and efficiency. I can see cons that you answer to investors and shareholders who expect profit in a way that NASA doesn't, right? And just as a sidebar curiosity question, what's the role of space tourism in the business model?
Spent my career advancing commercial space, and it's always been taken great umbrage. I like that word. Taking great umbrage that space is the only undertaking of this government, this society, where it's totally was run by the government. And so we have no other agency that designed, developed, and operated. The Air Force doesn't design, develop, and operate the aircraft carriers or the fighter jets. The agricultural department doesn't design the tractors, but NASA designed, developed, and operated the space shuttle and Skylab, and it just there's no other word. It ticks me off, and and. Yeah, no, I found out we're streaming. I'm not going to tell you how. But it's an incredibly important point because we talked about Mr. Kroger. Okay, these institutions today were started by entrepreneurs. There was a Mr. Boeing, there was a Mr. Lockheed, there was a Mr. Northrop, there was a Mr. Grumman. Unfortunately, all men, but entrepreneurial, the creativity of the private sector is how we do things. And the other thing that really sort of ticks me is they say space is too important. Okay, well, there's a lot of things that are very important. Now we're trusting the astronaut lives to the private sector. And shameless plugs. A few days ago, I released a graphic novel called From the Earth to Mars, and it's going to be multiple episodes looking at the true history of space from, as you can tell, my opinionated but factual view. Okay, and it talks about the 1920s were a wonderful time until the 30s when the government got involved and we got off. And one other thing, if I may, there's a fascinating study done by a professor on the West Coast. I forget the name now. He looked at the Arctic missions to Antarctica and the North Pole in the 1880s, 1890s. 1910, and about 40% of them were private sector, private funded, and 60% were government. Newsflash, the government ones used antiquated technology. The government ones had more fatalities. The private sector ones were, better, the ships, the government ones had all sorts of incredibly designed protective clothes, whereas the private sector used the animal fur that the indigenous people had used. The private sector, the professor concluded that the private sector was safer because they were often led by the people putting in the money, so their personal safety was on the line. I don't see the heads of our government going to space. Well, Bill Nelson did, but anytime soon. So it's my sort of rambling way of saying we have historical evidence that the private sector in this country is the right way for new ventures. We need the government as a customer. We need them as a partner. With aviation, the public funds are used for the airports, government workers are safe, but people selling the planes and the tickets are private sector. So that's how I see it.
Thank you for that. Lots of detail there. Next question, sir.
Hi, thank you. My name is Tyler Young. I'm a graduate student at The Ohio State University in the Department of Engineering Education. And while you were talking today, I was reminded of a recent speaker we had in the department who said that the existence of The Ohio State University should impact the STEM education of every child in Columbus. And that if we're not doing that, then we're not living up to our mission and our vision as a land-grant university. And so I was thinking the presence of this collaboration, this replica of Starlab, we've been talking about how it's a fundamental step towards sustaining human life in low Earth orbit and beyond, and increasing our reach into the stars. But I'm wondering how it affects the livelihoods of everyone in Columbus. Dr. Shearer, you mentioned the fact that there are people in Columbus who do not have access to healthy and nutritious food regularly. So I'm wondering if there's any connection that you can make between Starlab and the people here in Columbus who are necessarily involved in space exploration.
Well, I'm going to start with, you mentioned STEM education, okay? And one of the things that I've discovered, and I guess I've probably known this in my entire life, one of the curiosities of children is space. Okay? at the end of the day, John's and I have had this experience at Ohio State University in I'm going to say, in organic fashion. We have a student group that's formed, interested in space. They come from all over the university. It's not just engineering, and I'm an engineer, so I like engineers. Don't misunderstand me, but it's a people from a variety of backgrounds with kind of a common interest. And so when you ask about how we're going to or this is going to impact the lives, I think there's going to be a lot of children in our grade schools that are going to be inspired by what's going on in Columbus, Ohio. And hopefully that translates into them seeking out opportunities to pursue their interest, especially in the STEM disciplines. I think this is a great thing. And again, and John will talk about this a little bit, but we have this student group that's called the Diamond Grove Scholars, yes. And it's kind of been an organic thing, but every day we turn around, there's more students that are involved in it. And it'd be different if we were out advertising all the time, but it's word of mouth among the students. And so I see some great opportunities here to connect with the school systems. We're talking about what we do through the Cooperative Extension Service on the agriculture side and 4-H. I think there's some tremendous opportunities here to get students excited about STEM careers that may not have thought about them before. And space is that unifying thing where everybody has that curiosity and maybe that aspiration of I know when I was growing up of being an astronaut or whatever, but maybe that still holds true today as well.
The Diamond Grove, by the way, is the little crossroads in southwestern Missouri where Carver was born. So it's the geographic point on Earth from which all of his genius and all of his accomplishments and all of his contributions, it's the point from which that all sprang. And so these students, I think rightly, see themselves as the organism, the community from which all the future positive outcomes will spring. I think a student in Columbus will have the ability to go walk into the terrestrial analog facility and walk through a space station. And they will be able to see themselves in that context. And sometimes the most important thing you can do to inspire a young woman or a young man to something is to say, see, look how you fit here. There are people like you here that maybe believe the same, worship the same, talk the same way you have parents and grandparents that came from the same part of the world as you have come from. To see yourself in that context, and to be able to immerse yourself in that makes it very real. And so when I was, sort of joking about the size of the parking lot with the school buses, that's exactly why. Because every young man who can see themselves in that facility can say, not only can I visit, there'll be a time when I can work here or see myself actually working on the part of the science park that happens to be in orbit. It's going to be very, very powerful. And we're designing with that in mind. That will not be something that's sort of layered onto the top. But as Dr. Bertley said, one of the first things we started working on is how are we going to bake this in.
Terrific. I want to thank the folks from the audience and the folks online who submitted questions. As we wrap up, just for each of you, 30 seconds. What would be a rhyming couplet, or what would be the one thing you want the audience to remember overall?
One, this is our 1950 moment where Birmingham was bigger than Atlanta, and some people made some good choices. Perfect. I have this traffic. And Birmingham's a nice place, don't get me wrong. But I think it's pretty obvious to see what's happened. This is a moment for us in Columbus, in Ohio, and in the upper Midwest, I think more broadly, to think about commercial spaceflight and space activities as a way to skate towards the puck, not as an industry that we'd like to attract, but as something that's going to be absolutely essential for the growth and well-being of the people who will live here and everywhere else in the future. And we've got a great opportunity.
I'd add to what John just said, that we're at the very beginning now. And so the next 20, 30 years are going to be among the most exciting in the space community. More and more companies are involved. Space has never been more important to this nation before. And so this is a wonderful opportunity. It's a growth area, and it's also very important.
Well, the one take-home message that I'd like to leave you with, I think historically we've always viewed NASA and the space program kind of synonymously. And when we looked at, I'm going to say when I think about the backgrounds of most of the people in NASA, predominantly they were engineers. Okay, this is a turning point in some respects. I'm not saying there aren't other professionals in NASA. Please don't misunderstand. But this is truly going to involve all disciplines that we think of in academia. And it's from the human health communities, if you will, certainly all of engineering, certainly all of the College of Food and Environmental Sciences. It reaches across virtually every discipline in the university. And so, again, I think we have to be careful that we don't leave the room with the thought that the people in the space program of the future are going to be simply engineers, and that would be my take on this.
Oh, fantastic! I'll just add with this win, with the Intel investment, with Ottawa and OSU, Kent and all these other regional institutions, just the proliferation of stuff that's happening in this great city. It's so wonderful to be part of this great community, and I look forward to the next 40 years, as you say, and beyond. With that, I want to turn over to my colleague, Mr. Barnes.
Thank you, Dr. B. Appreciate it. Let's give them a big round of applause one more time. That was fantastic. Came in really honestly not knowing anything of what you all were talking about. I had no idea, and now couldn't be more excited and fascinated by the future of not just Starlab, but just space exploration in general, the commercial space industry. Thank you so much for your expertise, your candor. I hope you all left here enlightened by what you heard, and again, excited for the future of what this city and this region is to come here. A big thank you to the Kroger Company and AECOM once again for sponsoring today's forum, as well as again the Grange Insurance Audubon Center for its support and for hosting us once again. Thank you to our virtual seat patrons, Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. Special appreciation again to our speakers, John Horak, Jeffrey Member, Scott Shearer, and our host, Frederick Bertley, Dr. B. I'm sure he would love to talk about the King Tut exhibit coming next month, but not now. We only have so much time. But as you mentioned, these are exciting times for Central Ohio because we go from space exploration to our next forum, Licking County planning its ideal intel future. And you know how big that's going to be. And that'll be right here next Wednesday at the Grange Insurance Audubon Center. Again, make sure you take that short survey on the QR code. Just take that with you as you walk out. And again, we could not do this without you. Have a great afternoon. Thanks for coming, everyone.